My name is Hazel Merritt. I am 29 years old. 3 months ago, I was standing in my kitchen making coffee when my phone rang. It was my doctor. She told me that the blood work came back and that the levels of a certain substance in my body were dangerously high. Not from an illness, not from anything I had done to myself. She said, and I will never forget these words, Hazel, this looks like it could be poisoning. I thought she had the wrong patient. I thought maybe I had misheard her. But then she said it again, slowly, carefully, like she was making sure each word landed. And when I finally understood what she was telling me, I felt the floor disappear beneath me. Someone had been poisoning me. And whoever did it had been doing it for a long time. Before I tell you everything that happened, please like and subscribe to Heartlane Stories. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know you're out there. Okay? Let's go back to the beginning. It started about 4 months before that phone call. I had been feeling off, not sick exactly, just wrong, tired in a way that sleep didn't fix. I'd wake up after 8 hours and feel like I hadn't slept at all. My hands would shake sometimes, just slightly, when I picked up my coffee mug in the morning. I started losing weight without trying. My hair was thinning at the temples. I went to my regular doctor and she ran some basic labs. Everything came back within normal range. She said I was probably stressed and suggested I take vitamin D and try to sleep more. So I did what most people do. I told myself it was nothing. I was a third-grade teacher at an elementary school in Raleigh, North Carolina, and the school year had been brutal. Large class sizes, short staffing, and a new curriculum nobody had been trained on properly. I figured the exhaustion was just the job. My husband agreed. He kept saying I needed to slow down, take better care of myself. He'd bring me herbal tea every night before bed. He'd make sure I was drinking it while it was hot. He was so attentive. I remember thinking how lucky I was. We had been married for 4 years. We met when I was 24 at a mutual friend's backyard barbecue in the summer. He was funny and easy to talk to, and I fell for him fast. We got married 18 months later in a small ceremony at my parents' house. My younger sister was my maid of honor. She wore a dusty blue dress and cried through the whole thing. It was one of the happiest days of my life. My parents had passed their home down to me when they moved to an assisted living facility about 2 years into my marriage. The house was paid off and it sat on a decent-sized lot in a neighborhood that had gotten considerably more valuable over the years. There was also a life insurance policy my father had set up for me years ago with a death benefit of $400,000. I had changed the beneficiary to my husband when we got married. It felt like the right thing to do at the time. That's what married people do. You build a life together. You protect each other. I never thought about any of that when I started feeling sick. It never crossed my mind. By December, I was getting worse. The shaking in my hands had become more noticeable. I started having stomach cramps that would hit out of nowhere, so bad that I had to sit down and breathe through them. I missed 3 days of school in 1 week. My principal pulled me aside and asked, gently but seriously, whether I needed to take medical leave. I told her I was seeing a doctor. That part was true. I had gone back to my doctor, and this time she referred me to a gastroenterologist. He ran more tests. Still nothing definitive. He said it might be IBS, possibly aggravated by stress. He put me on a low FODMAP diet and told me to follow up in 6 weeks. I followed the diet perfectly. I didn't feel any better. My sister had started calling more frequently. She lives about 40 minutes away, and she would drive over on weekends sometimes just to check on me. She never said it directly, but I could see it in the way she looked at me. She was worried. One Saturday, she sat across from me at the kitchen table while I picked at a bowl of rice, and she said very quietly, "You look like you did when Mom was going through chemo." My mother had recovered, thank God, but that image, my mother thin and pale and exhausted, was not one I wanted to carry. I told my sister I was fine, that the doctors were on top of it. She nodded, but she didn't look convinced. My husband was present during most of these conversations. He sat beside me and rubbed my back and said things like, "She's doing everything the doctors say, and we're staying positive." My sister would watch him when he talked. I didn't notice it at the time. Later, she told me she'd had a feeling she couldn't name, something that made her chest tighten when he spoke. She ignored it because she had no reason not to trust him. Neither did I. In January, I had a particularly bad episode. I woke up at 2 in the morning with severe stomach cramping, vomiting, and what felt like every muscle in my body seizing at once. My husband called 911. I spent 2 nights in the hospital. They ran more tests. They hydrated me. By the time I was discharged, the acute symptoms had passed and the attending physician chalked it up to a possible viral infection layered on top of an already sensitive GI system. He adjusted my medications and sent me home with instructions to rest. My husband picked me up. He held my hand in the car. He said, "I don't know what I'd do if something happened to you." I believed him. When I got home, the first thing he did was make me a cup of tea, chamomile with a little honey, just the way I liked it. He set it on the nightstand beside me and kissed my forehead. I fell asleep holding the mug. I don't know why it took me so long to connect the dots. I think when something is slow and gradual, your brain doesn't want to see it. You explain it away. You rationalize. You trust the people around you because you've been trusting them for years, and there has been no reason to stop. The phone call from my doctor came on a Thursday in February. She had ordered a heavy metals panel as part of a broader investigation into why I wasn't improving. She told me that my levels of thallium, a toxic heavy metal, were significantly elevated. She had already been on the phone with the toxicologist before she called me. She told me not to eat or drink anything at home until we could figure out the source. She told me to come in first thing the next morning. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time after that call. My husband was downstairs. I could hear the television on, some home renovation show he liked. I sat very still and I tried to think through what she had said. Thallium poisoning. I didn't even know what thallium was. I Googled it with shaking hands. Colorless, odorless, tasteless. Used in some industrial settings. Historically used as a rat poison before being banned for residential use. Symptoms include fatigue, hair loss, GI distress, muscle weakness, neurological effects. It accumulates over time with repeated exposure. Every single symptom on that list was mine. I did not go downstairs that night. I told my husband I wasn't feeling well and needed to sleep early. He brought me tea, as he always did. I set it on the nightstand and did not drink it. The next morning, I drove to the doctor's office alone. I told my husband I had a routine follow-up appointment and that there was no need for him to come. He offered. I said no. Something inside me was pulling tight, like a wire being wound too tightly around a post. I didn't know what I was afraid of yet, but I was afraid. My doctor sat with me for almost an hour. She brought in the toxicologist by phone. They explained what they had found and what it meant. The exposure was not from a single event. The levels suggested repeated ingestion over a period of weeks, possibly months. They asked me about my environment, my job, anything I might have been exposed to. I thought through everything carefully. There was nothing at school that could explain it. I had no industrial exposure, no unusual hobbies, no recent travel. Is there anything you ingest regularly at home? The toxicologist asked. Something a family member prepares for you, perhaps? A drink? A supplement? The word family member landed like something cold. I thought about the tea. Every single night, chamomile with honey, made by my husband. Set on the nightstand, he'd stay until I drank it. If I fell asleep before finishing it, he'd wake me gently. "Drink your tea, Hazel," he'd say softly, while it's still warm. I drove home from that appointment in silence. My hands were on the wheel, but I don't remember making decisions about where to turn. I just arrived home somehow. My husband's car was in the driveway. I sat in my car in the street for 10 minutes. Then I called my sister. I didn't tell her everything immediately. I just said I needed her to come over that evening, that it was important, and that I needed her to not say anything to anyone before she got there. She heard something in my voice. She didn't ask questions. She said, "I'll be there by 6. I walked inside. I smiled. I said I was tired from the appointment. My husband made dinner. We ate together. He washed the dishes while I sat at the kitchen table and watched him and thought about the fact that I might be sitting across from the person who was trying to kill me. That night, he made tea. I took it and thanked him and waited until he was asleep before I poured it into a clean mason jar I had hidden under the bathroom sink. I sealed it and put it in my work bag. My sister arrived the next day, not that evening as planned, but in the morning. She had barely slept. She said she'd been up all night thinking about what I might need to tell her. I showed her the lab results. I showed her the printouts from my doctor. I told her about the tea. I watched her face change as I talked, something shifting behind her eyes from concern into something harder and more focused. She did not panic. That is one of the things I love most about my sister. When things get serious, she gets quiet and steady, and she thinks, "Okay," she said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "We need to do this right. We can't confront him. We need to go to the police." That afternoon, while my husband was at work, my sister drove me to the Raleigh Police Department. I brought the mason jar. I brought the lab results. I brought a folder with my medical records going back to October. The detective who took our report was a woman who looked to be in her mid-40s. She had a calm, unhurried way of speaking that made me feel like I wasn't going to fall apart completely. She listened to everything. She looked at the documentation. She looked at the mason jar. She said, "We're going to need to test this." She also said something else which I was not prepared for. She said, "Do you know if your husband has access to your life insurance policy information?" The $400,000 policy. The house with no mortgage. I hadn't thought about it. I had not let myself think about it. "Yes," I said. "He does." She nodded slowly. "Okay, here's what I need you to do. Go home. Act normal. Don't change anything about your routine. Don't drink the tea. Do not confront him. Can you do that?" I told her I could. I was not at all sure that was true. The next 11 days were the hardest of my life. I went home and I taught school every morning, and I came home every afternoon, and I sat across from my husband at dinner and I watched him pour out 2 cups of chamomile tea every night, and I smiled and I thanked him and I waited until he was asleep, and then I emptied mine into the mason jar I had hidden in my gym bag. He seemed completely normal. He talked about weekend plans. He talked about a work project he was stressed about. He asked me if I was feeling any better, and I said, "Maybe a little," and he squeezed my hand and said, "Good, you're going to get through this." I looked at him when he said it. I looked at his face. He looked worried. He looked like my husband. I kept waiting to see something that would make it obvious, some flicker of calculation, some moment where the mask slipped. I never saw it. That is what scared me the most. The call came on a Wednesday. The detective. She said the mason jar had tested positive for thallium sulfate. She said her team had also obtained a search warrant and had found, in a storage unit my husband had rented under a family member's name, a quantity of thallium sulfate compound along with financial documents related to my life insurance policy and a printout about the contested ownership of my family's property. She said he had consulted with a real estate attorney, apparently to understand what would happen to the house in the event of my death. She said, "We're moving on this today. Are you somewhere safe right now?" I was in my classroom. My students had just gone to lunch. I was sitting in my desk with 22 small chairs arranged in front of me and finger-painted butterflies drying on the window, and I said yes, I was safe. She told me to stay at the school until they contacted me. She said they would send an officer to keep an eye on the building. He was arrested at his office that afternoon. My sister picked me up from school. She didn't say anything when she pulled up. She just looked at me, and I got in the car and we drove. She took me to her house, and I sat on her couch, and her dog climbed into my lap, and I cried until I didn't have anything left. The days after the arrest were a blur of logistics. A victim's advocate from the DA's office called me. My principal was incredibly kind and gave me time off. My doctor started the process of monitoring my thallium levels as I recovered, which she said could take several months given how long the exposure had been going on. I had to tell my parents. That was one of the hardest phone calls I've ever made. My father was silent for a very long time. Then he said very quietly, "Are you safe now?" I told him yes. He said, "That's all that matters right now." My husband was charged with poisoning with intent to commit murder and insurance fraud. The prosecution argued premeditation based on the duration of the poisoning and the evidence found in the storage unit. His attorney argued there was no direct proof he had administered the poison. The evidence, however, told a different story. The storage unit. The searches on his laptop about thallium symptoms and detection windows. The inquiry to the insurance company 6 weeks before I first got sick. Financial records showing he had been quietly moving money in anticipation of something. His trial lasted 8 days. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. He was convicted. He was sentenced to 22 years in prison without the possibility of parole for the first 14. I was not in the courtroom for the sentencing. My sister wanted me to go to see it, to have closure, but I couldn't. I don't know how to explain it except to say that I had spent 4 years loving that man. I had stood in my parents' backyard in a white dress and made promises to him. The grief of what I lost, not just the safety, not just the years of my health, but the life I thought I had. That grief doesn't go away just because justice is served. It sits in you. It changes shape, but it doesn't leave. My sister called me from outside the courthouse when the sentence was read. She said it quietly. 22 years? She asked if I was okay. I told her honestly that I didn't know yet. What I do know is this. My hair is growing back. The trembling in my hands is mostly gone. I still get tired faster than I used to, and my doctor says that might continue for a while as my body keeps clearing the accumulation. But I am here. I wake up every morning in my own house, the house my parents gave me, and I make my own coffee, and I breathe, and I am here. My sister comes over most Sundays now. We sit on the back porch and drink coffee and watch her dog run laps around the yard. Sometimes we don't even talk that much. We just sit there, and that's enough. That's more than enough. I don't know why he did it. Not really. I have theories. The money, yes. The property, the life insurance. But I also think there is something inside certain people that the people who love them simply cannot see. Something cold and patient that waits for the right circumstances. I thought I knew him. I thought I knew what love looked like in that house. I was wrong. And carrying that, the wrongness of it, the gap between what I believed and what was true, that is something I will be working through for a very long time. But I am alive to work through it. And that is the thing I hold on to when the nights get hard. I am still here. I still think about the tea sometimes. The way he set it on the nightstand every single night. The way he'd wait until I drank it. The way I thanked him for it. There's a particular kind of pain that comes not from what someone did to you, but from who you believed they were while they were doing it. I didn't just lose a marriage. I lost the version of my life I thought I was living. And untangling those two things, the real and the imagined, takes a lot longer than any toxicology report. But here's what I've come to understand. Sitting on my back porch on Sunday mornings with my sister, watching her dog run circles in the yard. The truth has its own gravity. You can hide something for a while. You can hide it behind chamomile tea and quiet concern and a hand on the small of someone's back. But it pulls downward eventually. It always does. What my husband did didn't unravel because I was clever enough to catch him. It unraveled because over time, the weight of what he'd set in motion became too heavy to conceal. The lab results. The storage unit. The searches on his laptop. The insurance inquiry. None of those things disappear just because you smile at dinner. Actions accumulate. Consequences follow. That's not fate or punishment in any mystical sense. It's just the way reality keeps score. What saved me was paying attention, not to my marriage, not to the story I'd been telling myself about who my husband was, but to the small details that didn't line up. The shaking that didn't stop, the symptoms that didn't match any diagnosis, the question the toxicologist asked about something a family member prepared for me. I had been so willing to explain things away that I almost explained myself into a grave. I think a lot of people do that. We trust the frame we built around our lives, and when something inside that frame looks wrong, we find a way to make it fit rather than question the frame itself. Learning to question the frame, to look at your own life clearly even when it's uncomfortable, That might be the most important thing I've ever done. And then there was my sister, the one who drove over without asking why, the one who looked at lab results she didn't fully understand and said, "We need to do this right." She didn't fall apart. She didn't make it about herself. She just steadied herself and helped me figure out the next step. I want to be that person for the people I love. I want to be the one who shows up when the call comes at an odd hour and something in someone's voice sounds wrong. That kind of quiet, reliable courage, the kind that doesn't announce itself, that's worth more than almost anything I can think of. I'm still recovering. My doctor says my levels are down significantly and trending in the right direction. My hair is thicker than it was 6 months ago. Some mornings I feel almost like myself. I make my own coffee now. I grind the beans, measure the water, and I stand in my kitchen in the house my parents gave me, and I drink it in silence before the day starts. It's a small thing, but it is entirely mine, and I don't take that for granted anymore.